I still remember the exact moment I almost quit gardening for good. 6 weeks of waiting for a tomato, and still nothing to eat. But you don't actually have to wait that long. There are vegetables you can harvest in under 30 days, some in less than 10. The fastest of all, microgreens. They aren't a special variety, just regular vegetable seeds harvested at their peak nutrient stage. These tiny plants can hold up to 40 times the nutrients of mature vegetables. They are a literal superfood you can grow on your windowsill. The setup is simple: a tray, some soil, and light. Seeds germinate in 2 days, and you can harvest your first crop in just 1 week. Once you eat something you grew in 9 days, your entire mindset changes. Gardening becomes about stacking small, fast wins. This is just the beginning of the fastest harvest you'll ever grow. Are you ready to start? Radishes might be the single most underrated vegetable in American gardening culture. Most people treat them as an afterthought, something you grow just to fill empty space in a garden bed. But that's a major mistake. Handled properly, radishes are one of the fastest and most reliable food crops a beginner can grow. The classic variety for speed is Cherry Bell. Under normal growing conditions, it reaches harvestable size in about 22 to 24 days. Another popular option is French breakfast, which takes slightly longer but produces a milder, almost sweet flavor that many people prefer raw in salads. There are slower radish varieties as well, like the striking watermelon radish, but those can take up to 70 days. For a fast harvest plan, those are better saved for later. What makes radishes so powerful for beginners is their reliability. According to field trial data from Johnny's Selected Seeds, radishes consistently rank among the most forgiving cool season crops for germination across nearly every American growing zone. Seeds typically sprout within 3 to 5 days, and they do so across an unusually wide temperature range, anywhere between 45 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. That flexibility matters. Many vegetables are far more sensitive. Spinach can stall in heat, beans can rot in cold soil, but radishes thrive across conditions that would stop other crops entirely. Growing them is straightforward. Sow the seeds directly in the soil about 1/4 inch deep, spacing them roughly 1 inch apart in rows about 6 inches apart. No transplanting, no indoor seed starting, no complicated setup. Once the seedlings appear, thin them to about 2 inches apart. This step matters more than most beginners realize. When radishes are crowded, they produce lots of leaves but very small roots. Proper spacing allows the bulb to form properly underground. But here's the hidden bonus that most gardeners accidentally throw away. Those tiny seedlings you remove during thinning, they're edible. Radish sprouts are crisp, peppery, and excellent in salads, tacos, ramen bowls, or grain dishes. That means a single radish planting often produces 2 harvests, the sprouts first and the mature roots a few weeks later. Radishes also serve another useful role in the garden. They attract flea beetles, one of the most common pests in American vegetable gardens. The insects concentrate on the radish leaves instead of attacking nearby crops, effectively turning radishes into a natural trap crop. In other words, they protect the rest of your garden while producing food at the same time. And this is where fast harvest gardening starts to get interesting, because once you've grown something in 9 days and pulled your first root crop just 3 weeks later, you begin to realize the garden can move much faster than most people expect. Now let's move into the next stage. Green onions are a game changer. They're used in everything from soups to stir fries, yet most of us buy them automatically at the store for nearly $2 a bunch. But you can grow them for just cents in a windowsill container. There are 2 fast ways: starting from seed or simply regrowing root ends in water. Seeds like evergreen hardy white reach harvest size in just 20 days. Alternatively, store-bought root ends regenerate in water in just 2 weeks. In garden beds, scallions help repel pests like aphids and carrot flies using natural sulfur compounds. This means they produce food while quietly protecting your nearby vegetables. One small row can provide 5 to 6 cutting cycles, making it one of the most efficient crops you can grow. It's a permanent kitchen resource that earns its space twice. Stop buying them and start growing. Next, we'll see which popular salad vegetable reaches harvest size in just 3 weeks. Now, let's move to the next stage. Arugula has quietly become one of the defining greens in modern American cooking. It shows up everywhere: salads, sandwiches, pizzas, grain bowls, and it carries a reputation for being a chef's green. But the truth is, arugula might be one of the easiest crops a beginner can grow. The key is harvesting it young. When arugula reaches full maturity, the leaves can become sharply peppery and slightly bitter. That's the flavor many people encounter at restaurants. But when harvested as baby arugula at around 3 to 4 inches tall, the flavor is completely different: mild, tender, and far more balanced. And the growth speed is impressive. Under ideal cool season conditions, arugula seeds germinate in about 4 days. From there, the plants reach baby harvest size in roughly 21 to 30 days. Seeds are sown directly into soil about 1/4 inch deep. Arugula germinates aggressively and adapts well to both garden beds and containers. The real advantage is how it's harvested. By cutting the outer leaves while leaving the center intact, the plant can regenerate, giving you 3 to 4 harvest cycles. Arugula thrives in cooler weather, performing best between 45 and 65 degrees. It can even survive frost down to 22 degrees with a simple row cover. For most gardeners, it's one of the most dependable crops available. But there's another vegetable most people buy every week that's just as easy to grow. And this is where timing becomes critical. Spinach is one of the most widely consumed leafy greens in the United States. According to USDA retail data, it ranks as the second most purchased salad green after lettuce. And yet many home gardeners avoid growing it entirely. The reason is simple. Spinach has a reputation for being difficult. But in reality, the difficulty usually comes from planting it at the wrong time of year. Spinach is not a summer crop, it's a cool season plant, and once you understand that single principle, it becomes one of the most reliable vegetables you can grow. The ideal soil temperature for spinach sits between 35 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. That means the best planting windows are early spring, about 4 to 6 weeks before the last frost, and fall, roughly 6 to 8 weeks before the first frost. In many parts of the American South, spinach can even grow through winter. For this fast harvest system, we're not waiting for full-size spinach plants, we're growing baby spinach. Baby spinach is harvested when the leaves are only 2 to 3 inches tall. At that stage, the leaves are tender, mild, and perfect for fresh salads. Several varieties perform especially well for this purpose. Bloomsdale Longstanding is a classic heirloom variety known for its resilience. Space is a compact hybrid that grows quickly and performs well in containers. Thai is another reliable option with excellent disease resistance. These varieties typically germinate within 5 to 8 days and reach baby harvest size in roughly 21 to 25 days. Harvesting is simple. Instead of pulling the entire plant from the soil, you cut the leaves about 1 inch above the crown. This allows the plant to regenerate and produce another round of leaves within 10 to 14 days. That means a single planting can produce multiple harvests, and the productivity can be surprisingly high. A modest 4x4 raised bed planted with spinach can supply enough greens for several large salads each week. Considering that pre-washed spinach often sells for around $5 per container, that small bed can produce a substantial amount of food value in a very limited space. Spinach also brings exceptional nutrition. It provides high levels of vitamin A, vitamin C, iron, and folate, making it one of the most nutrient-dense greens available. But the next crop on this list goes even further. There's a leafy vegetable that can deliver over 500% of your daily vitamin K in a single cup, and it can reach harvest size in under a month. That's where things start to get interesting. Mustard greens are one of the most nutritionally powerful vegetables you can grow in a home garden. Yet outside of the American Southeast, they're surprisingly underrepresented in backyard gardens. That's unfortunate because mustard greens combine 3 things most gardeners are looking for: speed, nutrition, and resilience. Let's start with the nutrition. A single cup of chopped mustard greens provides over 500% of the recommended daily value of vitamin K. It also delivers substantial amounts of vitamin A, vitamin C, and important minerals such as calcium, manganese, and folate. Measured per calorie, mustard greens rank among the most nutrient-dense foods available, but what makes them especially valuable for fast harvest gardening is how quickly they grow. When harvested young as baby mustard greens, the plants reach harvest size in roughly 21 to 25 days. At this stage, the leaves are only about 2 to 3 inches tall, and the flavor is completely different from mature mustard greens. Fully grown plants can be intensely spicy, almost overwhelming for people who aren't used to them. But baby leaves are much milder. They carry a subtle peppery bite with a slightly fruity undertone that adds complexity to salads and fresh dishes. Several varieties perform particularly well for fast harvest. Red Giant produces deep burgundy leaves that are visually striking both in the garden and on the plate. Osaka Purple offers a similar dramatic color with a slightly milder flavor profile. For gardeners who prefer a gentler taste, Florida Broadleaf is a classic option with softer heat. Growing mustard greens requires very little effort. Seeds are sown directly into soil about 1/4 inch deep, and germination usually occurs within 3 to 5 days. The plants thrive in full sun but also tolerate partial shade, making them flexible for different garden setups. They're also impressively cold tolerant. Mustard greens can survive frost events down to about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes them a reliable cool season crop across a wide range of American growing zones. That resilience allows gardeners in zones 3 through 9 to grow them during both spring and fall planting cycles. However, there's one thing to keep in mind. Mustard greens belong to the Brassica family, which includes vegetables like broccoli, kale, and cabbage. Because of that relationship, they can attract some of the same pests, especially cabbage worms and flea beetles. Fortunately, the solution is simple. A lightweight row cover placed over the bed prevents both pests while still allowing sunlight and water to reach the plants. With that small layer of protection, mustard greens become one of the fastest and most dependable greens you can grow. But the next crop on this list brings something different to the table. Because unlike most leafy greens, this vegetable forms a complete mini head and still manages to mature in about a month. And this is where the timeline starts to get interesting. Bok choy might be one of the most underappreciated fast-growing vegetables in American home gardens. Yet interest in growing it has been rising rapidly. Over the past several years, online search trends show a sharp increase in Americans looking up how to grow bok choy, as Asian-influenced cooking becomes more common in home kitchens. And once you grow it yourself, the appeal becomes obvious. Baby bok choy is fundamentally different from the large mature heads often seen in grocery stores. It is harvested early as a compact mini head. Instead of waiting for a full-sized plant, it's usually harvested when it reaches about 4 to 6 inches tall. At that stage, the texture is exceptionally tender, and the flavor is noticeably milder than mature bok choy. The growth speed is what makes it remarkable. Dwarf varieties can reach harvest size in approximately 28 to 30 days. Dwarf varieties such as toy choy and mei ching choy can reach harvest size in just 1 month under cool conditions. Growing it is relatively simple. Seeds are sown directly in soil about 1/4 inch deep. Once the seedlings establish themselves, they should be thinned to roughly 6 inches apart to allow proper formation. Bok choy grows best in nutrient-rich soil and responds particularly well to nitrogen availability, which drives rapid leaf growth. For container gardeners, applying a light liquid fertilizer around the 2-week mark can noticeably accelerate development. In well-prepared raised beds, however, the plants often grow perfectly well without additional feeding. The simplest harvest method is to cut the entire mini head at the base once it reaches size. But if you want to stretch the harvest, you can remove the outer leaves first, allowing the center to continue growing. Temperature management is key. The plant strongly prefers cool conditions, ideally below 75 degrees. If it gets too hot, bok choy tends to bolt quickly, sending up a flower stalk instead of forming a compact head. For that reason, gardeners in zones 6 through 10 typically grow it in early spring or fall. Once you start harvesting your own tender heads, it becomes clear how efficiently fast crops can produce real meals. But the next crop on this list reveals one of the most overlooked tricks. Sometimes the fastest harvest isn't the vegetable you think. Most people grow beets for the root. That deep red bulb, earthy, sweet, and intensely colored, is what gardeners usually wait for. But the root takes time to develop, often 55 to 70 days before it reaches full size. What many gardeners don't realize is that the faster harvest from a beet plant isn't the root at all, it's the greens. Beet greens can be harvested in roughly 25 to 30 days, making them one of the quickest leafy vegetables you can grow. And nutritionally, they're far more valuable than most people expect. Beet greens are rich in vitamin A, vitamin C, iron, and potassium. They're also closely related to Swiss chard, which explains their slightly earthy flavor and their excellent performance when sautéed or lightly cooked. The taste falls somewhere between spinach and chard, mild, slightly sweet, and surprisingly tender when harvested young. Growing them is simple because you're already planting the same seeds used for root beets. But here's something interesting about those seeds. What looks like a single beet seed is actually a seed cluster, often containing 2 to 4 individual seeds inside. When they germinate, several seedlings appear from the same spot. This creates the perfect opportunity for your first harvest. Seeds are sown directly into the soil about 1/2 inch deep, spaced roughly 2 inches apart. Once the seedlings reach about 4 to 6 inches tall, they need to be thinned to around 3 inches of spacing so the remaining plants have room to develop their roots. Those thinnings are not waste, they're your first crop. The small seedlings you pull out can go straight into a salad bowl, delivering tender greens long before the beetroot itself is ready. After thinning, the remaining plants continue growing. At around 25 to 30 days, the outer leaves can be harvested regularly without damaging the plant. The key is moderation. Never remove more than about 1/3 of the leaves at a time. That allows the plant to continue feeding the root below the soil while still producing fresh greens above ground. Eventually, the root continues developing underground and can be harvested several weeks later. This means a single planting produces 2 completely separate harvests, leafy greens first and the beetroot later. In gardening terms, that's an extremely efficient use of space. 1 seed, 2 crops, and food arriving at 2 different points in the season. But the next crop on this list pushes the idea of baby greens even further, because one of the most famous health vegetables in the world becomes dramatically more enjoyable when it's harvested early, and this is where flavor starts to change. Kale has become one of the most recognizable symbols of healthy eating in the United States. For years, it has appeared in green smoothies, salads, and health-focused menus across the country. But the kale most people encounter in grocery stores is usually fully mature kale, and that version can be difficult to enjoy. Mature kale leaves are thick, fibrous, and strongly flavored. They often require cooking or heavy massaging to soften the texture enough for raw dishes. But when kale is harvested young, everything changes. Baby kale, cut when the leaves are only 2 to 3 inches tall, is dramatically more tender. The leaves are softer, the flavor is milder, and the slight bitterness that mature kale is known for almost completely disappears. At this stage, baby kale behaves more like a delicate salad green than a tough cooking vegetable. And it grows surprisingly fast. Certain varieties are especially well suited for early harvesting. Red Russian kale is one of the fastest reaching baby harvest size in roughly 25 to 30 days. Siberian kale grows at a similar pace and is particularly tolerant of cold conditions. Another popular option is dwarf blue-curled vates, which typically reaches baby harvest size in 30 to 35 days, producing very tender leaves that hold their texture well in salads. The growing method is flexible. Seeds can be scatter-sown in a dense patch and harvested all at once, cutting the entire group of plants about 1 inch above the soil surface. This allows the plants to regrow for another round of leaves. Alternatively, you can harvest individual outer leaves, leaving the central growing point intact so the plant continues producing over time. One of kale's biggest advantages is its ability to tolerate cold weather. Once established, kale plants can survive temperatures down to around 10 degrees Fahrenheit. In fact, frost exposure actually improves the flavor. Cold temperatures trigger a chemical change inside the plant where starches convert into sugars, resulting in sweeter leaves. This is why fall-grown kale often tastes noticeably better than spring-grown crops. For gardeners dealing with hot summers, kale is best grown in early spring or fall, especially in zones 6 and above. In warmer climates, zones 8 through 10, it can often be grown for much of the year. And for gardeners in colder northern climates, kale becomes one of the most reliable vegetables for late-season production. But the next crop on this list brings us back to an old tradition in American cooking. Because long before kale became a modern health icon, another leafy vegetable had already earned a permanent place in regional kitchens. And it happens to grow just as fast. Turnip greens have been a cornerstone of Southern American cooking for generations. Long before modern salad mixes or specialty greens became popular, turnip greens were already a staple food in home gardens and kitchens across the American South. And there's a good reason for that tradition. Turnips are one of the most cold-tolerant vegetables you can grow, and they produce food quickly. Just like beets, turnips actually offer 2 separate harvests from a single planting. The roots themselves usually take about 45 to 60 days to fully develop, but the greens, the leafy tops of the plant, can be harvested much earlier. In many cases, turnip greens are ready for cutting in just 25 to 30 days. The flavor sits somewhere between spinach and mustard greens. There's a mild peppery note, but it's usually softer and earthier than mustard greens, making it easier for many people to enjoy. From a nutritional standpoint, turnip greens are exceptional. 1 cup of cooked turnip greens provides over 650% of the recommended daily value of vitamin K. They also deliver significant amounts of vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and folate. For gardeners looking to grow nutrient-dense food quickly, turnips are an excellent option. Several varieties perform particularly well for fast greens production. The classic American variety purple top white globe is widely available and reliable. Another variety called 7 top is bred specifically for leaf production and produces very little root development, making it ideal if greens are your primary goal. Shogoin is another dual-purpose option that produces both tender leaves and a mild root. Growing turnip greens follows a very similar process to growing radishes. Seeds are direct sown into the soil about ½ inch deep and spaced a few inches apart. Germination is quick, usually 4 to 6 days under cool conditions, and the plants establish rapidly once they emerge. Under favorable temperatures, baby greens can sometimes be harvested in as little as 3 weeks. But one characteristic makes turnips especially interesting for fall gardens. Cold weather actually improves their flavor. When temperatures drop to around 28 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, the plant begins converting stored starches into sugars as a survival response. That process makes both the leaves and the root noticeably sweeter. It's one of the rare vegetables that genuinely benefits from frost exposure. For that reason, many experienced gardeners intentionally plan turnips as part of their late-season planting schedule. But if fast leafy harvests are the goal, the next crop might be the most efficient system of all. Because instead of growing a single vegetable, you grow an entire salad ecosystem at once. And that's where things become incredibly productive. A mesclun mix might be one of the most practical ways to grow salad greens at home. Instead of planting one type of lettuce at a time, mesclun mixes combine multiple greens into a single seed blend. These mixes often include loose-leaf lettuces, arugula, mustard greens, spinach, and sometimes small chicories. The core idea behind this system is very simple. You plant everything together, and when the greens grow, you harvest them all at once as a balanced salad blend. The result is a mixture of textures and flavors. Mild lettuce, slightly peppery arugula, and tender mustard greens. From a gardening perspective, this system is extremely efficient. Most baby lettuces reach harvest size at around 2 to 3 inches tall, which usually happens within 25 to 30 days from seed. That places them inside the 1-month harvest window. Several loose-leaf lettuce varieties perform especially well. Red Sales is among the fastest growing. Oak leaf and Lola Rosa are also highly dependable options for American growing conditions. And black-seeded Simpson remains a classic choice for high productivity. But what truly makes mesclun productive is the harvesting technique. Rather than pulling plants, the entire patch is cut about 1 to 2 inches above the soil surface. This allows the plants to regenerate new leaves from the base. This method is known as cut-and-come-again harvesting. Under warm conditions, new leaves often grow back to harvest size within 7 to 10 days. In cooler weather, regeneration may take around 2 weeks. With this system, a single bed can produce 3 to 5 harvest cycles before the plants eventually bolt. That productivity becomes significant when you consider the economics. In 2024, mixed salad greens in the United States averaged about $4.38 for a 5-ounce container. A single seed packet costs less than $3 and can produce 15 to 20 pounds of greens. The math becomes obvious very quickly. However, lettuce has one important environmental preference. It dislikes heat. Once temperatures consistently climb above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, plants tend to bolt. This sends up a flowering stalk that makes the leaves bitter. Gardeners in warmer climates can manage this by planting in partial shade or using shade cloth. In cooler regions, particularly the Pacific Northwest or Mountain West, lettuce grows comfortably through summer. But the final crop on this list grows even faster than most lettuce varieties. It sits somewhere between microgreens and a full vegetable crop, producing one of the freshest flavors. And that's where the timeline suddenly speeds up again. Cropped R12 pea shoots and tendrils. Pea shoots occupy an interesting space in gardening. They're not quite microgreens, and they're not a full vegetable crop either. Instead, they exist somewhere in between. And that position makes them one of the fastest and most flavorful greens you can grow. Pea shoots are simply the young growing tips of pea plants. Instead of allowing the plant to mature into a long vine, the tender stems and leaves are harvested early when the plants are only 2 to 4 inches tall. At that stage, the flavor is remarkably concentrated. Pea shoots taste intensely fresh and sweet, almost identical to the flavor of fresh peas themselves. The leaves and delicate curling tendrils also make them visually striking, which is why they often appear in restaurant dishes as garnishes. But they're incredibly easy to grow at home. The fastest method starts with soaking dried peas, standard snow peas, sugar snap peas, or field peas, in water for about 8 to 12 hours. This soaking process speeds up germination. Once soaked, the peas are sown densely in a shallow tray or container, roughly 1 seed per square inch. After planting, they're covered with about 1 inch of moist growing medium and kept consistently damp. At normal indoor temperatures, the shoots usually reach harvest size within 14 to 18 days. Unlike microgreens, pea shoots can regrow after cutting. If you leave the bottom 1 to 2 inches of stem intact, the plants will send up new growth, allowing a second or even third harvest. That makes them one of the most productive crops per square inch in this entire guide. They also perform well outdoors. Peas prefer cool soil conditions, typically between 40 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. In many parts of the United States, this means they can be planted as early as March or April. For gardeners growing pea shoots outdoors, the shoots can be harvested repeatedly through early spring. At that point, you have a choice. You can continue harvesting the young shoots and sacrifice the pod harvest, or allow the plant to grow normally and produce full snap peas later in the season. Either way, pea shoots offer one of the fastest and most flavorful harvests available in a home garden. But knowing these 12 fast crops is only part of the system, and that's where a simple strategy changes everything. Knowing which crops grow quickly is helpful, but the real power comes from how you sequence them. If everything is planted on the same day, most of these vegetables will reach harvest at roughly the same time. That creates a single burst of food, followed by long gaps where nothing new is ready. Experienced gardeners solve this problem with a simple strategy called succession planting. Instead of planting everything once, you stagger the timing so harvests arrive continuously. Here's what that looks like for a beginner starting a 30-day fast crop garden. Week 1 is your setup week. On day 1, start your first tray of microgreens. At the same time, sow radishes, arugula, mustard greens, and scallions directly in a garden bed or container. Next, soak and plant pea shoots in a separate tray. Then around day 5 or 6, start a second tray of microgreens. This staggered planting ensures that your harvest windows don't overlap too heavily. By day 7 to 10, your first tray of microgreens should be ready. This is your first real harvest. Cut the entire tray, rinse the greens, and eat them fresh. For most beginners, this moment changes everything. It's the first proof that the system works. By day 14, your pea shoots are ready for their first cutting. Meanwhile, the crops planted in the garden are beginning to establish themselves. During week 2, radishes, arugula, mustard greens, and spinach will be pushing through the soil and building their first sets of leaves. This is the perfect time to start a third microgreens tray to keep the harvest pipeline moving. Now the momentum begins. By week 3, somewhere between day 21 and 25, multiple crops start becoming harvestable at the same time. Baby arugula can be cut. Mustard greens reach salad size, spinach leaves are ready, scallion tops can be clipped. Radishes begin forming visible bulbs just below the soil surface. Pea shoots are already entering their second cutting cycle. Then by week 4, the garden fully comes alive. Radishes are ready to pull. Baby bok choy heads are forming. Beet greens, turnip greens, baby kale, and mesclun lettuce are all reaching peak baby leaf size. At this stage, something important happens. Instead of waiting for food to grow, you suddenly have more greens than you expected. The garden begins producing faster than you imagined possible. And that moment, when your garden finally becomes a reliable source of food, is when gardening stops feeling like an experiment and starts feeling like a system. But there's one final step that ties everything together. Because once all of these crops are ready at the same time, you need a simple way to actually turn them into a meal